Good day, grade 8 learners. Welcome to the Natural Sciences lesson. My name is Tebele Tebe, and this program is proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education. Remember, our knowledge area is life and living this term, and our topic is interactions and interdependence within the environment. But today, our subtopic that we're going to be looking at is adaptations. Let's check our lesson objectives. Remember, we need to achieve something by the end of the lesson. What is it that we are going to achieve? We are going to explain what adaptation is, and we are going to discuss adaptation in plants, and we are also going to describe how animals adapt by living in extreme environment, and we are also going to explain how animals use camouflage and mimicry as a form of adaptation. We are going to explain how animals use camouflage and mimicry as a form of adaptation. And we get all this from the CAPS document, page 38. Let's check the pre-knowledge. Remember, when we are talking about pre-knowledge, this is prior knowledge. This is what we already know. This is what we have already learned. Remember, when you were in grade 5 and 6, you did the concept of an ecosystem and feeding relationships. And then in grade 8, we've already covered ecosystems and feeding relationship. We are just building on grade 8. And then let's define the terms, right? We've got different terms that we need to define. We need to define these terms so that we'll be able to understand the lesson. We'll also be able to define these terms in our examinations. Remember now, from grade 8 up to grade 12, you'll be defining these terms. So let's make use of this time. Let's look at the first word. We've got extinct. What does the word extinct mean? When we are talking about extinct, we are talking about something that no longer exists. All right. For example, dinosaurs. We no longer have dinosaurs, right? They are now extinct. They no longer exist. They are no longer there. They've vanished. They've been eliminated. That's what we call extinct. And then adaptation. This is a feature, or we can say an appearance, that makes a plant or an animal well suited to survive in its environment. That is adaptation. This is gradual change. Animals can adapt, can change, or can live in a certain environment. All right. They can survive in different environments. Some can survive in extreme environments. For example, the camel, even the polar bear. Remember, the camel can survive in a desert. Why? Because of its structure, its physique. All right. And then it can also live in a desert. Why? Because of the food it eats. It can go for days without eating, can go for days without drinking water, and it has leathery mouth so that it can eat thorns, and the thorns can't hide it. Right. Let's move on. Let's look at camouflage. When we are talking about camouflage, we are talking about blending in. Right. For example, we've got predators, we also have prey. Some animals camouflage. They blend into the environment they are in so that they can get close to their prey, right, without being noticed. That is blending in. And then let's look at the next word, mimicry. When we talk about mimicry, mimicry is trying to look like something else. This is trickery. It's a form of trickery. This is a form of fooling other animals, thinking that, for example, we've got a coral snake and a milk snake. The milk snake is not poisonous, but the coral snake is extremely poisonous. But they look similar. They almost look alike. Therefore, the milk snake is tricking its predators so that they won't attack it, thinking that it is a venomous coral snake. Okay. And then let's go to the next. we've got adaptation. What can you say adaptation is? What is adaptation, grade 8? It is not just the characteristic or appearance, but it is a process of what? Adaptation is a process of gradual change. All right? It is changing. At times you can see a population of animals. You still remember a population. When we're talking about a population, we are talking about the same kind of species of animals. Let's say maybe we're talking about zebras. You'll see that one zebra can vary from the other zebras. This is gradual change. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a short space of time, but it happens in a long period of time. It can be from generation to generation. And these changes can mean that an animal can survive better or an animal cannot. All right. Most of the changes are beneficiary. And then what do we mean by defining adaptation like that? Adaptation is any change in an organism's structure. Now we are talking about the structure. For example, a camel. You see the structure of a camel. It has long legs. Why? It has got muscles. Why? It can spread its load on the what? On its feet. Right. This is structural. We are now talking about the structure. It is strong. Why? Because it survives in extreme environments. It can walk long distances. All right. And then, if we are talking about function, how an animal functions, right? How does it function? And then, behavior. How does an animal behave? For example, if you look at birds, they lay eggs, and the eggs have got what? A hard shell. Why? Because it is protecting its embryo from harsh climatic conditions. Do you get that? It is protecting its embryo. Then the embryo is going to grow in a shell, and then it will hatch. Okay? It would have been protected. Then we call that function. It is functional. And then the other one is behavior. When we're talking about behavior, behavior is learned. And some behavior is instinctive. If we say it's learned behavior, for example, let's take, for example, predators, cheetahs, or even tigers. When they hunt, they also teach their young ones to hunt. But how do they teach them? Because they don't talk like you and me, because we can teach each other, because we can understand each other. But the animals can also understand each other. How? The bigger animals will teach the young animals how to hunt. They will catch a small animal, then they don't kill it, they bring it to the young ones, and then they'll just put it there. Then the young ones will start trying to what? To kill it. If it runs, the older ones or the mother will catch it, bring it back, until the little ones manage to kill it, and then they will have their meal. That is learned behavior. But there is behavior that is instinctive. For example, the birds will prepare the nest for the young ones. All right. It is instinctive. All right. Even if for example, crocodiles, they lay their eggs outside the water source. All right. And then what happens to the eggs when they hatch? The little ones will go to the what? To the river, or they'll go to the water. Why? It is instinctive behavior. It is in them. They'll just feel like they belong in water, then they'll go to the water. That is what we call instinctive behavior. And then adaptation allows the organisms to survive as it adapts to changing conditions within the environment. Right. The animals have to survive to different what? Conditions. They need to adapt. They need to change to different weather conditions. Because if they don't adapt, what's going to happen? They might die because they fail to adapt. Okay? And then organisms that are unable to adapt to changes within the environment, what happens to them? They eventually die because they won't be able to what? To adapt. And if they don't adapt, they die, and at times they become extinct. All right. Let's move on. Let's look at structural adaptation. Remember, when we're talking about structural adaptation, we are talking about the physical characteristics of a species, such as having what? Long legs and strong muscles, like a camel. Right. Let's look at the camel. We've got a good picture of a camel. Look at the legs. Very long. Right. And then it enables them to walk in deserts, in extreme environments. Right. They can even walk for long distances on sand. All right. And look at the muscles. Strong muscles. They need to be strong. Right. Why? Because the environments in a desert are extreme. That is structural. That is the physical appearance of an organism. And then if we're talking about functional, we want to see how that kind of species functions. Right. For example, a species may have special way of carrying its life processes. When we're talking about life processes, remember in grade 7 you did the 7 life processes. When we're talking about life processes, we're talking about reproduction. The animals or the population needs to reproduce so that they will have the same species in the future. And then we can talk even about growth. They need to grow. They need to reproduce. Right. All those are some of the life processes that we are talking about. And then we've got animals. They need to function in special ways. For example, producing eggs with a hard shell, like the birds. They produce eggs with a hard shell. Why? Because they are protecting the embryos so that they can grow, develop, and hatch. Right. Let's look at the picture then. We've got eggs, right? Look at the shell. It is hard and it is protecting the embryo from the harsh climatic conditions. And then we've got a chick that has been hatched. And then let's look at behavioral. When we are looking at behavioral, remember I said behavior is learned and some is instinctive. All right. The species can have special behaviors that are instinctive. And then it is also learned behavior. They learn it from the older ones. All right. For example, we've got birds. They make nests for their young ones. They are protecting them. All right. And then let's have a look at the picture. You can see a bird there. It's busy making the nest. It wants to protect its young ones. All right. And then changing environmental conditions and adaptation. Conditions in an environment may change. For example, number 1, the environment may become hotter and drier, and there may be a shortage of what? Of resources. For example, let's look at this picture here. It's a land that is dry. There is no vegetation at all. We can only see dry trees. Why? Because it is dry. You can tell that there were floods here. That is a what? A condition that may make species not to thrive in that environment because it is one of the extreme environments. Okay. And then some living organisms have characteristics that help them survive changes in the environment. And then we've got living organisms they adapt to what? To certain environment earlier by chance or by accident. All right. At times it happens by chance. And then changing environment, and then changing the what? The conditions and adaptations. Remember we said adaptation is gradual change. It does not happen within a short space of time. It might happen over a long period of time. Do you get that? All right. Let's check the first point. Adaptation is passed on from parent to their young and cannot happen in one lifetime. That's why we are saying it can happen over time. It can be generation to generation. And then in any population, each individual is slightly different. That is what? Variation. All right. There are differences. Okay. That is variations. Even in different types of animals, if you look at a population, you will see that there is a difference between these animals. For example, we've got a picture of zebras. Just look at the zebras. Look at this one. It's different. This is what we call variation. But it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen over a short period of time. This animal, this zebra, is going to grow and reproduce. And then it will have its young ones. And it might pass these genes to its young ones. All right. And then we'll see that gradual change. That is adaptation. It is passed from generation to generation, because this zebra is going to have a young one and its young one is going to have a young one. Then it is passed from generation to generation. And these variations, at times, they make animals to survive better. All right. And then why are we saying it might pass these variations? The animals might survive better, they reproduce, and then they pass the beneficial characteristics to their young ones. All right. And then over time, the whole population might change. All right. And then the population will grow. But not all variations turn out to be useful to different individuals. Okay. Because some variations can make it difficult for an animal to survive. And then the animal might die. Okay. And then at times, it cannot affect an animal at all. And then adaptation in plants. Remember we said adaptation is gradual change. Plants that grow in the desert may have the following adaptations. That is the changes. When we're talking about adaptations, we are talking about changes grade 8. For example, let's look at the gazania plant. All right. Let's look at the color. Let's look at its characteristics. For example, the leaves are grayish and they've got hairs on it. All right. And the flowers are bright yellow. Why is it so? The gazania plant has gray hair leaves to reflect what? To reflect sunlight. Remember, it is a desert plant. It must protect its water. All right. And then that hair traps the moisture to reduce moisture loss because it is in a desert. A desert does not have a lot of water. It is dry. These are the extreme environments. But plants adapt to that climate. Even animals. That's why we've got the gazania plants. And then when we're talking about animals, we're talking about animals like camels, which can survive in a desert. Do you get it? Let's move on. And then what about the yellow flowers? They attract insects for pollination. Let's look at this. These bright yellow flowers, they will attract insects. For what? For pollination. And then plants that grow in water, they've got different adaptations. For example, we've got water lilies. when you look at a water lily, we've got a picture of a water lily here. Let's look at the water lily. It will be in water, and then it will have the breathing pores at the top here, on the top, okay, of the leaf, than on the underside of the leaf. The underside is in water, but the breathing pores will be at the top. All right. And then let's look at the flowers. They are very attractive. Do you see that? Why? Because they attract insects for pollination. And then we've got an activity, grade 8. We are going to write an activity. Let's start writing the activity. I'll just give you 3 minutes to answer these questions. Question number 1 says, explain what adaptation is. And then question number 2, explain 2 ways in which a prickly pear is adapted to survive. Let's answer that. Hope you are done answering the questions, grade 8. Let's look at the questions together. Question number 1 says, explain what adaptation is. And question 2, explain 2 ways in which a prickly pear is adapted to survive. Let's look at the solution for question number 1. When you are defining adaptation, we have said adaptation is gradual change. All right. And these changes might not be an overnight change. It is a gradual change. It can be from generation to generation. All right. For example, if we look at variations in animals, it won't be an overnight change, but it is a gradual change. It is generation to generation. Okay. And then an adaptation is a physical, we're talking about the physique of an animal. For example, the camels, they've got strong animals, all right? They've got strong muscles and they've got long legs. And then functional, we're now talking about the functional side of an animal. How do they function? All right. For example, let's say a bird lays eggs and then the eggshells are hard. Why? Because the eggshell is protecting the embryo inside, which is growing. But when it is mature, it is going to hatch. Then a chick is going to come out. And then behavioral characteristics. If we're looking at behavioral behavior is learned. And some behavior is what? Is instinctive. All right. Learned behavior, it is passed from generation to generation. Do you get it? It is from the parents to the offspring. That is behavior that is learned. And then it helps an organism to survive in its environment. That is adaptation. That is gradual change. And then let's look at question number 2. Question number 2, it says, explain 2 ways in which a prickly pear is adapted to survive. Let's look at the prickly pear. This is a prickly pear. And then the thorns stop the animals from eating the prickly pear. Okay. And then let's look at the other point. The prickly pear conserves water by not having what? By not having leaves. And then it also swells when there is what? A lot of rain. The freshly stems store water and swell during the rain. All right. And then let's look at adaptation in animals. Animals, adaptation, they adapt to extreme environments. When they adapt to extreme environments, they adapt because they need to survive. If an animal doesn't adapt, it doesn't survive. It will die eventually because it would have failed to adapt. It would have failed to change. It needs to change. Do you get it? All right. Let's look at camels. They've got humps. Why? Because they want to store some food. And then they can go for weeks without water and some months without even eating. All right. And then their bodies can tolerate high temperatures because they've adapted to an extreme environment. Remember, the weather in a desert, it is very hot during the day and it reaches freezing point during the night. Therefore, the camels adapt or change to suit or to survive in that environment. Okay. And then it does not have to sweat during the day because it will be very hot, but it doesn't sweat. Why? Because it needs to survive in that environment. It needs to store the fluids that it has. All right. It doesn't need to lose a lot of water because water is scarce in a desert. If it loses water, then it might not survive in a desert. All right. And then let's look at the camel here. We've got a picture of a camel. It's eating thorny bush. Why is it eating thorns? It eats thorns because it has adapted. It has leathery mouth. The thorns don't hurt it. All right? That's why it can eat it. And in a desert, we don't have these other plants that need a lot of water. The thorns survive in a desert because they don't need water. Therefore, the camels must eat thorns. Okay? And they can eat thorns. All right. Animal adaptation for extreme environment. We've got the camels and why are we still talking about camels? Their feet are wide. They can spread their load in desert sands. Remember, the desert is very hot and there's a lot of sand, and it is very difficult to walk on sand, but the camel can walk on sand because it can spread its feet and spread its load on the desert sand. And they've got long eyelashes and hair-lined nostrils, so that when it closes them, the sand or the dust cannot get into the eyes and cannot get into the nostrils. And then they've got thick leather lips. Why? So that even if they eat thorns, they won't get hurt. And then we've got polar bears as well. Polar bears are animals that we find in extreme environment. Which environment is that? We find polar bears in snowy areas and icy areas. They've got a thick layer of what? Of fat under their skin. Right? And they've got fluffy hair. Okay. They've got fluffy fur because it needs to be warm. It survives in extreme environment in very cold areas. Therefore, the fur is making them warm. And then we've got white polar bears that survive in snows. Why white? Because it needs to blend in with the environment. It is blending in so that when it hunts, the prey won't notice it until it gets closer. Therefore, it camouflages itself. Right. And then it also have fur on its what? On the soles of its feet. It is for what? It is for warmth, so that it cannot freeze to death. Therefore, that is change, that is adaptation, because an animal needs to suit its environment. And then they've got a thick layer of fat under its skin to keep it what? To keep it warm. And then they also have what? Small ears to reduce heat loss. And then they've got large paws so that they can spread their load on what? On snow, so that it can walk on snow. We've got a picture of a polar bear. It looks very cute. And then just check the color. It matches its environment. It is blending in its environment. And look at the soles, all right, of its feet. It has got fur. Why? Because it needs to be warm. Because this area is very cold. It is an icy area. It is in snowy area. It is very cold. Therefore, animals that survive in these extreme conditions must be well suited for that environment. Do you get that? And then predators have an adaptation that enables them to catch and hold prey. Why? All right, let's look at cheetahs. They can run very fast, all right? And their bodies are slim, but they've got long legs. And they've got a long tail for breaking power, all right? And then they hunt during the day, and then we can see the black spots on its eyes and the black lines. Why? Because they hunt during the day, therefore it needs to protect its eyes against the sun's glare. Do you get it? And it has got sharp paws. Why? Because it needs to hold its prey and then tear its flesh. And then they've got teeth that can kill an animal. All right. Cheetahs have got good eyesight. They've got long legs and narrow, lightweight body for acceleration and even for breaking power. And then they run very fast for short distances. They've got a long muscular tail as a counterweight for what? For balance, because it needs to balance. Remember, we've said it runs very fast. Okay. And then we've got a picture of a what? Of a cheetah. It's running very fast. Okay. It is one of the fastest animals in the world. Okay. But it runs very fast for short distances. And then they have an adaptation that enables them to catch and hold their prey. For example, as a well camouflaged, which helps them to get close to their prey. They are well camouflaged. What does it mean? They blend into the environment so that the prey won't notice it until it gets close to it. All right. We've got animals that camouflage, which are well camouflaged to their environment, especially carnivores, because carnivores are the animals that feed on what? On meat. They hunt for their prey. We've got different types of carnivores. We've got the predators. Now we are talking about the cheetah. It is a predator. It hunts for its prey. It hunts for its food. It hunts animals so that it can kill them and eat them. And then we've got other carnivores. For example, we've got scavengers. They hunt for dead animals to eat. We also have insectivores. They are carnivores. A chameleon is a carnivore. It camouflages itself, all right? It blends into the environment it is in. It feeds on insects and even small invertebrates, all right? Therefore, it camouflages itself. It blends into any environment that it is in. For example, if it goes to a leafy green place, it will change and becomes green. That is a chameleon. And then if it is in a what? Any other environment, it changes its color to blend into that environment. Okay. It helps it a lot because it catches insects easily, because it won't be easily noticeable. Do you get that? Good. And then they've got strong, sharp claws. These are the cheetahs. They've got strong, sharp claws. Why? To hold and tear the flesh of their prey. And then they also hunt during the day. The dark stripes on the cheetah's face that we have talked about, they are there to protect the eyes from the what? From the sun's glare. Okay. That's why it hunts during the day. Let's look at the picture of a cheetah here. Let's look at the dark spots. These are the dark stripes. All right. They protect the eyes of the cheetah from the what? From the sun's glare. Let's look at the paws. Let's look at the paws. They are very sharp. All right? They are very sharp. They can tear the flesh of an animal, and they're very strong. Okay. And then animals use different methods to avoid predators. Some animals fall under camouflaged animals and some mimicry. Okay. When we're talking about camouflage, we are talking about blending in to the environment. It can be prey that is camouflaging, or it can be a predator. All right. Let's check the next one. Camouflage helps organisms to blend in within their surrounding. They blend in. For example, a cheetah. The colors of the cheetah, it is not easily noticeable when it is hunting because it blends in with the grass. All right. It blends in with the environment that it is in. Therefore, it can not be noticeable until it gets close to its prey. Then it is going to be easy for it to kill that animal. All right. And then some are well camouflaged. They have colors and shapes that are similar to their environment and keep still when enemies are near. And then some animals resemble other animals or plants in color or even behavior, and we call that mimicry. Mimicry is trickery, all right? For example, if you've got a coral snake, it is very poisonous. And then we've got a milk snake. It is not poisonous. Therefore, if you look at them, they look similar. And then the enemies won't attack it. Why? Because it will think it is a venomous snake. Do you get it? Good. Let's move on. And then we've got a chameleon. A chameleon can blend into any environment. Therefore, it makes its life easy because it can hunt for its prey. Remember, a chameleon is a carnivore. It is an insectivore. Therefore, it feeds on insects. When it blends into an environment, then it's easy for it to catch insects without being noticed. You get that? Good. And then when we look at mimicry, it is a form of trickery. That is mimicry. Do you get it? Mimicry is a form of trickery. It fools other animals. They think it is something else when it is something else. That is what we call mimicry grade 8. Its purpose is to fool predators into thinking that the animal is something more dangerous than it is. Very clever, isn't it? Many caterpillars have eye spots or fake eyes. And then the harmless milk snake conveniently looks much like a coral snake, which is extremely poisonous. Then its predators won't attack it, thinking that it is a poisonous, venomous snake, when it is not. And then let's look at the caterpillars. Do you see this caterpillar? It has got different spots, all right? So that it won't be noticeable. You won't notice its eyes. Okay. And then we've got the venomous snake and the non-venomous snake. Look at them. They look similar. Right. That is mimicry. That is trickery. That is fooling other animals, especially predators, who would want to attack a non-venomous snake. Then they would think it is a what? A venomous snake. Do you see that? Interesting, isn't it? All right. We've got activity 2, which I want us to start writing on. We are going to write it for 3 minutes. But now let's read the questions together. Question number 1 says, give an example of a predator and describe how it can adapt by being a good predator. Give an example of a predator and describe how it adapts by being a good predator. Then 2, describe the adaptations shared by camels and polar bears. Then 3, distinguish between camouflage and mimicry. Distinguish between camouflage and mimicry. 3 minutes. Let's start writing. Well, grade 8, hope you have answered the questions. Let's check whether you answered correctly or not. Let's check question number 1. It says, give an example of a predator and describe how it adapts by being a good predator. We've got sharks, all right? They've got a good sense of what? They've got a good sense of smell and can sense movement in water. And they swim very fast because it has a what? Streamlined body. And then question number 2 says, describe the adaptations shared by camels and polar bears. Remember we talked about camels. The camels survive in extreme environments, and remember we talked about polar bears. They also survive in extreme environments, but these environments are not the same. When you're looking at camels, camels survive in a desert. It is very dry and very hot during the day, and it is very difficult to walk during the day because it is hot and there is a lot of sand, and water is scarce, and even food is scarce. But how do camels survive? Camels can drink water after some days. They can eat food after some days, and then they can also eat thorns, right? And then why are they able to eat thorns? It is because their mouths are leathery. They don't hurt themselves. Do you get that? And then the physique, that is the physical appearance of a camel, it is very strong. It has got muscles, it has got long legs, all right, and it can spread its wide feet on the desert sand. It can spread its load. Therefore, it can walk on a desert, on the sand of a desert, and it is very strong. It has got muscles. Therefore, it can walk for long distances, and it doesn't sweat. Why? Because it doesn't want to lose the water that is already scarce in a desert. And if we look at polar bears also survive in extreme environment, but it is opposite to the camels. Why? Because the polar bears survive in icy or snowy areas. All right. It is very cold where they survive, and then they've got thick fur that protects them from the cold. They even have fur on the soles of its feet to protect it from the cold. And then it has got small ears so that heat cannot escape easily. And then it camouflages itself. It blends into the environment because of its color and the color of the environment. Remember, it survives in snowy areas and icy areas. It is white, and then it is also white. Therefore, it blends in easily. And then camouflage helps it so that it can hunt for its prey without being noticeable until it gets closer. Do you get it? Good. And then let's check the answers to question 2. Camels have got wide feet to spread the load on the desert sand. They also have long eyelashes and hair-lined nostrils. Why? Because it needs to keep out the dust. It has to protect its eyes and its nose from the dust and from the sand. And then what about polar bears? They've got long paws to spread its load on ice and snow. And then camels and polar bears have small ears. They've got small ears. And then question number 3. Distinguish between camouflage and mimicry. Let's look at camouflage. When we're talking about camouflage, we are talking about adaptation that gives an animal an ability to blend in to its environment. Okay, it blends into its environment, or we can say it blends into its surroundings using, it can either be shape or even color. Do you get it? That is camouflage. For example, we're talking about the polar bear. It blends into its environment. Okay. And then let's move on to mimicry. When we're talking about mimicry, we are talking about trickery. We are talking about an animal that fools other animals. For example, let's take a scarlet snake, a very venomous snake, and a milk snake. The milk snake will look exactly like a venomous snake. Why? Like a coral snake. Why? Because it is mimicking it. It doesn't want its predators to kill it, because its predators will be fooled thinking that this is a venomous snake when it is a non-venomous snake. That is mimicry. Do you get it? Good. Let's summarize our lesson, grade 8. An adaptation is a physical, functional, or behavior characteristic that helps an organism to survive in its environment. When we are talking about adaptation, we are talking about gradual change. That is adaptation. Adaptation or gradual change cannot just happen overnight. It happens over long periods of time. And then we're talking about adaptation. An animal can adapt or can change to suit in its environment, because if it doesn't adapt, it might die. Therefore, we are looking at what? The physical features. For example, let's take a camel, for example. Let's look at the physical feature of a camel. It is very strong. It has got strong muscles. It has got long legs. All right? And its feet are wide. It can spread its load on the desert sand. Do you get that? And then those strong muscles show us that the camel is very strong. It can survive in extreme environments. It can walk on sand. Remember, it is very difficult to walk on desert sand. Do you get it? And we know the weather conditions in a desert. It is very hot during the day, and it is freezing during the night. And then the camel doesn't sweat. Why? Because the water is scarce in a desert. Do you get it? And it has got leathery lips. Why? Because it must not hurt itself when it is eating thorny bushes. All right? And then when we are looking at an animal like a polar bear, it also survives in extreme environments. It survives in snowy areas and icy areas, but it has got thick fur, okay, so that it won't be cold. The thick fur will protect it from the cold. It will make it feel warm. It has got short ears so that the heat cannot escape. All right? It has got fur on its soles so that it keeps it warm. Do you get it? And then it blends in to its surroundings. For example, a white polar bear, and the environment is also white because the snow or the ice is what? It's white as well. And then that is the physical appearance. But functional, when we are talking about functional, we are talking about the function. For example, a bird will lay eggs with a hard shell, right, to protect its embryo so that it will grow and then it will hatch after some time. And then behavioral, we are talking about behavior. Behavior, remember, it is learned and also it is instinctive. Do you get it? The parents will protect their young ones. At times, the parents will teach their young ones. Do you get it? Good. And then let's look at the camel. You can see the picture of the camel. You can see the long legs. You can see the wide feet. You can see the strong muscles. See this? This is a picture of a camel. And then adaptation for extreme environment as well. We've got a camel that survives in a desert, and also a polar bear that survives in very cold areas. Okay. And then adaptations in predators. Let's look at the cheetah. It blends into its environment. All right. And then it also has dark spots on its eyes. It has got dark eyes so that it what? It protects its eyes from the sun's glare. Do you get it? It is a predator, therefore it has to blend into its environment, and then the prey won't notice it until it gets closer to its prey, so that it can what? So that it can hunt and kill animals. Do you get it? Good. And then we've got butterfly. We've got a palatable butterfly and non-palatable butterfly. Do you get it? And then they look almost the same. This is mimicry. Do you get it? This is a form of trickery. And even the snake. We've got the coral snake, which is venomous, and we've got the scarlet king snake, which is non-venomous. Do you get it? Good. Therefore, these animals are tricking the what? The other animals. They can fool the predators, or they can even fool the what? Its prey, so that it gets closer. Okay? That is camouflage, and then catch their prey. And then it uses color at times shape. Do you get it? Good. All right, grade 8. If you've got questions, make sure you send your questions to 082-760-2630. Our question line again, it is 082-760-2630. Make sure you send us questions. We've got an amazing team behind the scenes who are going to answer you. All right. And then let's look at the cheetah. Look at the color. This is camouflage. All right. It is blending in with its environment. All right. It is blending in within its surroundings. Therefore, it will be very difficult for the prey to notice it. Do you get that? Good. That is camouflage. Then preview of the next lesson. What are we going to do in our next lesson? We are going to talk about conservation of ecosystems. We are going to talk about conservation of ecosystems. All right, grade 8 today. No one asked a question. Make sure you send in your questions. We will answer you even if we are done with our live questions. Okay. Make sure you ask questions even if we are done with our live lesson. Ask questions, we are going to answer you. Thank you very much. Make sure you sanitize, maintain social distance, and always wear a mask. Till we meet again, goodbye.